Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Program Teacher Certification class. If you're joining us online, if you're here at the Peaceful Solution headquarters, please take a seat. Thank you for the warm welcome. And thank you, Father, or thank you also, everyone, for coming to another class as we continue our journey in positive character building. If you're joining us online, I want to remind you can download the manuals on the Facebook page at the top. There's a drop-down menu, and we have all the manuals we've been teaching since, I want to say it's been since November of 2020. We're already in 2023. Okay. So yeah, November 21st or somewhere around there of 2020 was our first class. And we've gone through the intermediate series of the junior high Peaceful Solution program. We're in the fourth book, the Respect Unit. You can download the teacher's manual. You can use the teacher's manual. We encourage you to use it in your family, your school, your workplace, anywhere that you can teach the Peaceful Solution. Please feel free to do so. The only thing we ask is you don't change the content because, if you want the best results with the Peaceful Solution, you want to make sure you teach it as it's written in the procedures of the lessons for the most optimal effect, and to really, the teachers that put this together, the 50 teachers, along with the author of the Peaceful Solution, the 50 teachers that put it together knew how to instill these positive character traits within all of us, one step at a time, okay? And they knew exactly how it needed to be done. They're experts at what they do, so we need to follow those instructions, as we'll see as we proceed in the lesson tonight. We're in Chapter 4 of the Respect Unit. Chris just started last class in the Respect in Society. We were in the note to the teacher, and I'm probably going to end up rehearsing that entire note. I know he didn't get through the whole thing, but it really is very imperative that all of us, when we do these lessons, when we prepare to give a class, since this is a certification course, we need to make sure that we always go to the note to the teacher before we teach any class that we're teaching, because we really want to remind ourselves what's the purpose and the goal, the overall purpose and goal of what we're trying to achieve in this particular lesson. Okay, so we're going to go back now to LP 4A. That's where we left off. And Chapter 4, Respect in Society, Note to the Teacher. And it says, because we live in a society characterized by diversity and culture, respect must be practiced consistently if we are to eradicate violence, crime, and racism. And that word eradicate means to do away with these things. And, it's not going to occur overnight, The Peaceful Solution, teaching the Peaceful Solution is like one individual at a time, one class at a time, one individual at a time. It's like a hen pecking at a mountain, trying to bring that mountain down. It takes a lifetime of work even to overcome our own negative character traits. It's not an overnight thing. It's a constant practice. It's a journey, as it says. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and 1,000 miles is a long journey, but it's achievable if we get on the road, we take that first step, and we don't give up. We do everything we can and be determined to have a positive character, to develop that positive character. We can achieve that. We can do it. Now it says, remember, we live in a diverse culture. That means, here in America, it's the melting pot of the world. You got everyone of every culture in the entire world living in this country. As Chris indicated in the last class, everybody wants to come here to America. Most people want to come here because they feel like they have more opportunity here than they do in the places that they're at. Of course, if everyone was taught positive character throughout the world, they wouldn't be leaving their countries. Nobody really wants to leave their homeland or their country because they love their countries. The problem is the people that run the countries don't have positive character. They haven't been trained yet. So there's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of crime. There's a lot of injustice, unfairness. There's a lot of political persecution. Where one party persecutes the other party. We even see it here in America now. We see the war between the Democrats and the Republicans escalating, actually, to where now we even have, moves being made to arrest former presidents. Political moves, strictly political moves. And, these things, we're used to seeing them take place in other countries, but, it's actually come home to roost here. And it all stems, remember, all these things stem from a lack of moral character training. Okay, that's all it is. It's just a lack of moral character training. We wouldn't see the crime, the violence, the political persecution, the things that we see today if the leaders were taught the peaceful solution from a young age. Because leadership, as we learn in the character unit, leadership, we're learning to lead ourselves first. We have to learn to lead ourselves. We have to develop these positive character traits and instill them within ourselves to be able to lead other people in the right direction as well. So again, it says, one of the most disturbing consequences of living in a society that condones so many forms of disrespect is that its people become desensitized to it, internalize it as normal, and accept it as unavoidable. In other words, we see so much violence on television and the movies, we hear it in the songs, we see it in the video games. It's so prevalent in our society that we just tend to think it's normal. We see the school shootings that occur ever so often, and we just have accepted it. This is just the way things go. It's like bullying, where parents say, bullying occurs between brothers and sisters. Bullying occurs at schools. It's just a normal thing, they say. But it's not normal. Again, it goes back to the lack of moral character training. People are not being taught to care. They're not taught to care and concern for others, the considering others, considering the thoughts and feelings of other people before they act. If we were instilling these things in the minds of the children from a young age, they would be more likely to be thinking about these things. But it's out of sight, out of mind. If you're not teaching moral character, why would anyone even know what it is? Or why would they even consider that they need to build a moral character? Okay, so it says, it has become customary to view and hear vulgar language and watch obscene gestures and violent behavior in every form of entertainment. Okay, let's see. Well, can you put up the first slide, please? Yeah, there it is. We're used to hearing the profanity, the foul language. We hear it even in the music now. And it used to be that certain words weren't used even on television, but now the words, they're using some of those words on television that they would never use except in the movies, in the R-rated movies or the X-rated movies. Now they're using them in, on television. Okay, so it's becoming prevalent, where you're walking down the road and you hear, or you're walking through the parking lot at the grocery store and somebody drives by and their boombox is blasting and there's profanity coming out of the speaker, with children around and, it's normal. It's become normal in our society to hear these things. And people talk to each other like that. They even call each other, children in junior high schools and high schools, they call each other names that used to start fights when I was in school. They use the B word and other words like it's normal. And they call each other these obscenities. And it just really shows how far we've degraded morally in our conduct, okay? Where certain words were never used in public, now their speech is laced with profanity constantly. Then we see the violent movies and the obscene gestures. I put up the word obscene there so you can see what the word obscene means. It means of the portrayal or description of sexual matters offensive or disgusting by accepted standards of morality and decency. Accepted standards of morality and decency. Well, sad to say, in our society, we don't have any real standard, not a moral standard. If we had a moral standard, we would not be allowing these things in our society. We wouldn't be allowing these things to be shown, to people, okay? And I guess you could say, well, wouldn't that be considered, what's that, constitutional right to free speech? Wouldn't that be violating my free speech or my right to, see whatever I want to see or do whatever I want to do? Well, no. The problem is free speech was never intended to give you the right to speak things that are ill or things that are hurtful or hateful toward people. It was never intended to be that way. If you look at the writings of the forefathers of America, it was more aimed at political speech, being able to speak certain political ideas without fear of being persecuted or even religious speech without fear of being persecuted or tormented by people that wanted to retaliate against you because they weren't of the same political party or the same religion. But it was never meant that we should have free speech to be able to demoralize and hurt other people. That's not what the free speech clause is intended to give us, but that's what, it's the same thing with abortion, Well, we have a constitutional right to abortion, they say. Well, show me where in the Constitution it says you have a right to have an abortion. It's not there. And 9 different men on a Supreme Court can have 9 different ideas and read 9 different things into something, but if it's not written there in writing, it's just their own idea and their own interpretation. I don't read those things in any of those in the Bill of Rights that we have in America. I don't see any of that in there, but this is where if your mind is trained in a certain way or it's geared toward wanting a certain thing, you can read anything into anything you read, I guess, Okay, but it's become customary to hear this kind of language and watch obscene gestures. It's become customary to view and hear vulgar language, watch obscene gestures, and violent behavior in every form of entertainment. These acts of disrespect are not normal by any means and should not be accepted as just another sign of our changing times. Get with it, man. It's 2023, right? What's wrong with, we're evolving, right? We're evolving, we started out as fish, and now now we should be able to, watch naked people on television, right? Really. This is the insanity that we hear. It's not true, but it's the insanity we're hearing. Morality, yes, is true since the advent of television in the 1930s, 1940s. The morals have gone down significantly because of certain things that are shown on the television that were never accepted as normal or moral behavior or morally decent back decades ago. But I also want you to understand, it wasn't that those things weren't being, even in the early 1900s. I remember reading in 1934, they had to form a commission in Hollywood because the movie industry had gotten so obscene that they had to form a committee to start, it was a committee that was trying to put moral decency back into filmmaking. So this isn't anything new. by any stretch of the imagination. You know, I mean, ever so often these things do come about, but it has dramatically declined. The morals have dramatically declined, certainly since the 1930s, 1940s, with the advent of the television. And the idea is that these television programs are putting in the minds of the people are totally contrary to what we teach in the Peaceful Solution Character Education program. Does that mean all programming is detrimental? Not necessarily. There are some documentaries, there are some educational programs, science-type programs or nature-type programs you can learn from, homemaking or building, construction-type programs that you can learn from. But, you know, the entertainment that's shown in prime time and, you know, throughout, you know, most of the afternoons, you know, with the, I don't know what they show anymore. I don't even watch them anymore, but it used to be, what was it, Dr. Phil and Ricky Lake and, you know, these talk shows. What was that guy where everybody threw chairs at each other? Jerry Springer, you know, where I guess they were just expected, you know, to throw chairs at each other, you know, air their dirty laundry in front of the nation. So the other person would get angry at them and they'd start throwing chairs and, you know, things like this. This is being packaged as entertainment, but it's all immoral conduct, okay? And it's training our children to think that these forms of disrespect are just normal and they're part of society and that we have to live with it. It's internalizing within us that it, you know, we just need to accept it. It's just part of life, and it's not true. Or that we should accept it, as it says, as another sign of our changing times. You know, can you put up the next slide? Because I want to give a promo for what we got coming up. In a few days, we're going to be having our Peaceful Solution Character Education Program Spring Conference, 2023 Spring Conference. And, you know, it has to do with, you know, positive character has no generation gap. You know, let's conform to the peaceful solution. There's a generation, you know, the generation gap, I used to hear a lot about it when I was young. But, you know, when it comes to positive character education, you know, there's no generation gap. You know, in fact, I had something I was going to read you. I don't think it's right there, but I think it's coming up. Actually, it's coming up in a couple slides. Let's go to the next. No, let's not go to the next slide. Let me read a little bit. And I want to hit on this generation gap idea that there's no positive character has no generation gap. You know, young and old alike can both agree on these moral principles. Okay? There should be no gap there. There should be no difference between the old and the young when it comes to do not, you know, lay your hands on other people's property. You know, whether we're young or old, none of us like it. You know, ask any child right now, do you like it when somebody puts their hands on your property? No. You know? And children will let you know very quickly if you put your hands on their property. Hey, what are you doing? You know? Well, adults do the same thing. So you see, there's no generation gap there when it comes to positive character. You know, we all agree that there's certain principles and codes of conduct that we all need to follow, regardless of what age we are, regardless of what gender we are, etc. All right, so I'm continuing on page LP4A here in the note to the teacher. In the previous chapters, it says students learned about the value of respecting themselves and others. In this chapter, they will learn that respect is necessary on a societal level. You know, it's necessary, as we found. First of all, it's necessary within ourselves. We have to have self-respect. Okay? We learned it's also necessary that we respect others. Okay? And, you know, we're also learning now that we need to respect, you know, everyone in society. You know, we have to have a respect on a societal level. And remember, a society is just a group of individuals, you know, with supposed to have shared common goals and values. Okay? And I remember talking about this before, you know, about societies, that there's societies even within society. Okay? You know, there's For instance, one idea would be the Amish people. The Amish people live, a lot of them live without electricity, and they have certain practices that they do that they're still living pretty much in the 1800s the way they do things. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, but that's a society even within our society. They have their own group of individual people that live a certain lifestyle. Okay. And you have many, many other groups that do the same thing. Okay, it says, they will explore some of the adverse effects of disregarding the rules that govern respectful interactions. So can you put up the next slide? Because I want to kind of go over these topics. These are the page I'm reading from here in the LP4A, but other topics that we're going to cover in this lesson, it says, are violence and crime result from a lack of respect for others. Okay, and we're going to look at that meaning of respect here in a few minutes again, because we need to keep reminding ourselves what respect means. No, respect is not, wearing a chain, a big gold chain that hangs out and it says respect, on it, or something like that, or, carrying a big gun, or, selling drugs and having lots of chicks, or, whatever else, that, makes you respectable, so, as they say in the music industry, that's not respect, it's quite different. Okay, that's the beauty of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. You like to learn what true respect is, what true moral values are, not the watered down version that you get out there in society, because remember, they have not been taught moral character. I know that seems to be a bold statement. And I know you think, well, my mom taught me not to steal. My dad taught me not to steal. My grandma told me not to bully people, and I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did the best they knew how to train us, to do what's right. I don't disagree with that. But what I'm telling you is, until you come to the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, you don't even know what stealing is. You think you know what stealing is, but there's many, many, many forms of stealing, number one. And then there's many, 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 many things we need to learn, many steps, many techniques and tools we need to learn not to steal. Okay, whether it's stealing time, stealing authority, stealing someone's reputation, stealing property, whatever it is we're stealing. Okay, so, stealing is a very in-depth, in fact, the Peaceful Solution, it's really all about do not steal, and as we advance through these books, you'll start to understand more and more how when we break any of these rules, it's a form of stealing, okay, and we break any rule, okay, so continuing, it says, other topics covered are also, second bullet point says, disrespect in the form of racism has robbed millions of people their dignity and even their lives. It's really sad that in 2023 we still have such a thing called racism. I can't even believe that, because I was taught, and I believed at one time there were races too, don't get me wrong, because I didn't know the Peaceful Solution, but to me, now that I know that there's no such thing as races, there's only one race, the human race. And once I was taught, well, just like there's only one species of dog, and there's only one species called cat, and there's only one species called cow, and there's, once I put two and two together with that through the training I received, then I kind of thought, man, I can't believe people still think this way. I can't believe people still believe there's races. Right? But again, until you get trained, until you get educated and you get all the facts and you make sure they're correct, you'll keep thinking the same thing. But it's robbed millions of people of their dignity and even their lives. And now they're talking about giving reparations, I guess. I don't remember if it was the state of California or one of these states. We're talking about giving these big checks, to people that are ancestors of slavery and things like that. And I'm thinking, well, I guess I'll be waiting on my check too, because I'm sure, the Caucasians were slaves at one time too. So I guess I'll need to find out what country I can get my check from, right? I mean, is this going to solve the problem if we cut everyone a check? That's going to end the racism and the hatred if you cut me a check? No. What we need to do is put it in check, by training people in these simple moral principles. Money doesn't bring peace. A check's not going to bring peace. Giving us some kind of bonus or dividend, to pay back things that were done to people that weren't even alive in our lifetime, that's not going to solve our problem. None of this is going to solve the problem. The only answer is education and moral character. That's the answer. Okay? I know it, but it takes work. It takes a lot of work. Okay, we're going to see that. It takes a lot of work to teach the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. It's not an easy job. Okay? It's one individual at a time. There's 4 billion. How many people are there in this world? 8 billion? And climbing? Right? If things keep going the way they are, there won't be 8 billion. There'll be probably, it'll reduce greatly. It'll reduce greatly once they start hitting those nuclear buttons, which they will eventually if they're not trained the right way. We're also going to learn about the role of media in perpetuating disrespect. The media now, I'm a firm believer in just telling it how it is. I don't know what to believe anymore on TV. I don't know who's lying to me anymore. I don't even believe what I see on TV for the most part anymore, because the media is perpetuating political hatred. There's a one-sidedness now in most of the television programming or the reporting that goes on the news. And it's all opinionated. It's all depending on whatever their political slant is, And to me, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the facts. Don't tell me, don't give me your ideas based on what you believe or what your political persuasions are. Give me the facts. We can't get that anymore. I'm sad to say, because a lot of these, and even people that want to report the news, they want to give you the real news. And there are some sites out there that are, independent, I guess, but even the ones that want to report real news are quickly axed from their positions in these newsrooms, because they have to follow a certain political agenda. Okay, and if they don't, they can't stay. So really, it's more like, it's not really reporting news, it's really propaganda. Okay, it's whatever propaganda they want you to spew out to the people. And as I said, I don't trust any of the news anymore. I don't trust any of these news agencies for the most part, because this is what's going on. And again, it's because of a lack of moral character training. Remember, all of this stems from immoral character. That's all it is, okay? They're not being taught the peaceful solution. Okay, it says the next bullet point, we also are going to cover why people choose to show disrespect in society. Why people choose to show disrespect in society. And remember, you get more like the monkey see, monkey do mentality. Like I remember the, not that we're monkeys or anything, but and not that we even came from monkeys, but we do tend to imitate what we see. It reminds me of that picture of the boy, he's sitting there watching WrestleMania with his parents, and he's got his, they're watching the TV and they're watching WrestleMania, and the boy's got his brother in a headlock, Well, that's what people tend to do. What they see, what they hear is what they tend to portray in their own life, or, what they tend to act out. Okay, and then the final bullet point there, it says, we're also going to cover how society benefits when all its members consistently demonstrate respectful interactions. And, we're interacting all the time, because remember, we are dependent, we're interdependent on one another. How many people did you did you have some kind of interaction with just today? Just think about it. How many people you actually spoke to, in school or at work, or, just possibly you had a phone call or two. You interacted with many people. Possibly you went to the store and you interacted with the cashier, etc. So, we need to learn the benefits that everyone will receive if we consistently show respect in our interactions. All right, so let's see. Continuing on LP4A there, it says, as parents, role models, and educators, we can agree that any subject we want our children to learn must first be taught. Now, can you underline that? Just underline that, or highlight it if you have a highlighter. Underline that. It's very important right there. It says, as parents, role models, and educators, we can agree that any subject we want our children to learn must first be taught. Okay? It has to be taught. We have to be taught. We have to be trained. And I know we tend to think, well, what do you mean I have to train my child how to clean the toilet? Shouldn't they know? Just go in there and wipe that thing. Well, no, that's not quite how it goes. I'm using that as an example, what do you mean I have to train my child how to clean their room? They should know how to clean their room. You just pick things up and you put them away. Yeah, okay. Well, they picked them up and they threw it all in the closet. So why are you upset that they threw it all in the closet and it's in the floor in the closet? At least they cleaned the room out, right? Well, if you don't like how they cleaned it, why don't you show them how to clean it? Teach them how to clean it, right? You have to teach everything that we learned, or everything that we know right now. Didn't we learn? You learned how to use a fork, a spoon, a knife. You learned how to chew with your mouth closed. Some of us did, right? We learned all these basic things because we were trained. We were taught how to do it, okay? Why would moral character be any different? In this regard, character education is no different. If we want future generations to be moral, respectful citizens, then we must sit them in front of the TV and let Hollywood train them. No, that didn't work, did it? It didn't work. My parents tried it. I came home from school every day, from elementary school, and I sat down and watched Underdog. That trained me, bro. I learned how to take a pill and become super dog and go around and fight crime. Well, that was Underdog. I don't think they even have that anymore. I got to watch Pink Panther, and other morally educational programs, right? Superheroes, and I got to see people get their teeth knocked out, and I got to see people stealing and, just basically creating mayhem for everybody else. And that trained me well, right? Well, yeah, it trained me well in doing what was wrong. It trained me well in having a disrespectful attitude toward my fellow human beings and myself too, for the most part. But it didn't train me in what we're trying to get across in the peaceful solution, which is to be moral, respectful citizens. So if we want future generations to be moral, respectful citizens, then we must teach and instill morality. Morality. Now, what is morality? Well, we're going to see here in a minute, because the character unit, page 8 and page 170, show us that. I'll show you in a minute. And respect into the mind of every child until the choice to interact respectfully with all people becomes a habit. Oh, okay. So when you learned how to ride a bike, or you learned how to whistle even, I remember I spent many, many days trying to learn how to whistle, but let's use riding a bike as an example. Does any of us here remember how long it took us to ride a bike? I know for me, I was on training wheels for at least, I can probably remember at least one summer, might have been even 2 summers, before I had the training wheels taken off. And even then, when I had the training wheels taken off, I cracked that bike up many, many times. I fell a few times before I could learn how to ride that bike, habitually well. Okay? And anything that we learned to do was the same thing, whether we learned to walk, whatever it was, whatever we learned to do, it took us a while. It wasn't something that was overnight. Okay? And it's the same thing with this morality and respect that we need to build into people's minds. It's not an overnight thing. It's going to take patience on our part, You know who's really tested really more with this is the teacher, because you can train the student and you think, okay, they got it now, they understand because I just read it to them, so surely they're going to know what to do. Well, is it really that easy? How long does it take a child to, start actually performing the things that you train them to do? It can take years sometimes. Okay? So that's where patience comes in on our part. Remember, we're being trained. Patience is a moral character trait, So if you want to become patient, become a teacher of the peaceful solution. It'll train you to become patient, because you'll see it's not an easy job to instill moral character into a people that live in an immoral society that is totally against and opposed to what we're teaching. They're totally opposed to it. Now, why are they totally opposed to it? They don't know why. It's just what they've been trained to do. Like you can be trained by Hollywood, or you can be trained by the peaceful solution. Your choice. Your children, your choice, right? So we have to instill it into the mind, morality and respect into the mind of every child, until the choice to interact respectfully with all people becomes a habit. All right, and let's see. You could turn the page to LP4B. Here's something else I want you to underline. Okay? And actually, before we read that, go to the next slide, because I want to give the definition of morals. I promised I would do that. This is page 8, morals. What do they have to do with my character? Remember the generation gap statement I made? There's no generation gap when it comes to moral character. Listen closely what this says. Regardless of culture, religion, or environment, there are some values that all people share. They are called moral values. A moral value is like a line that divides wrong behavior from right behavior. People from all walks of life, young or old, big or small, rich or poor, share some of the same basic concepts of moral values. Okay? You see that? Young and old, no generation gap there. Okay? No child likes to be teased or bullied or stolen from. No adult likes to be teased or bullied or stolen from, right? There's no generation gap there. We all agree on these moral principles, that we need to obey these moral principles, and we want to be treated with the respect that's shown there, that the peaceful solution shows. On page 170 of the peaceful solution, it says morals. That means of or concerned with the judgment of the human action and character, conforming to standards of what is right or just in behavior, virtuous. And remember that second part of the upcoming conference, the name of the conference, it's called, Peaceful Solution. Positive character has no generation gap. Let's conform to the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. And that's a choice that we have to make, to conform. Remember, conformity comes by choice. We have to choose to conform to these moral principles. To conform means, remember, to fit in. To fit in. And so where do we want to fit in? Do we want to fit in a coffin? Do we want to fit in a prison cell? I hear lots of young people say, well, everybody else is doing it, why can't I do it? Well, yeah, but everybody else is getting STDs, and everybody else is going to prison, and everybody else has divorces and all kinds of legal troubles. Just watch any soap opera, I mean, You know, they're always in trouble, just getting out of trouble, or they're in the middle of trouble, right? I mean, that's what most people's lives are like. Remember, we learned in the character unit, there's no family that's totally functional. You know, they're all dysfunctional in some way. Okay? Even the family that you look at, you think is perfect. You know, like on TV, you know, Family Ties. I remember growing up watching Family Ties. It looked like a perfect family, right? No. You know, you don't know what goes on behind closed doors when you're not looking, right? But everybody, if you haven't been trained in moral character, we all have problems, okay? We're all overcoming. There's nobody in this world that's not struggling to overcome some negative character traits. Some of them have some positive character traits, but they have the mixture, okay? Don't forget that. Everybody needs a peaceful solution. So back to LP4D. Let me see. What was it? LP4B. Sorry. At the top, I want you to highlight this. I want you to highlight this. If we believe something is possible and can be achieved, we will work toward it. Underline that. Highlight it. Let's say it again. If we believe something is possible and can be achieved, we will work towards it. There's that 4-letter word that no one likes. Work. It takes work. And I know it seems to be impossible because you're thinking, you know, I remember Israel Hawkins when he went to the United Nations back in 2000. A matter of fact, I have a picture of him. Can you put that picture up? Skip the next slide real quick and go to that picture of Israel Hawkins at the United Nations back in 2000. 8/28/2000, he was invited to the United Nations to speak to our world leaders regarding the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. And this man worked his entire life, over 50, 60 years, developing, training, getting the training and developing his character to be able to pass these moral character traits on to us. Was that an overnight thing? Nope. It was not an overnight thing. That took a lifetime of commitment. A lifetime of commitment. Has he seen that achieved yet? World peace that he wanted to achieve? Has he seen that yet? No, not yet. So that means that, those that he's trained, right? Some have been trained for, many, many years now. Some are just coming in now to be trained. We've got a lot of work to do. But think about all the work he did and all the people he reached in his lifetime. Just think about it. I mean, I know you don't know, but the man went all over the Middle East back in the 90s, early 2000s, okay, spreading the peaceful solution message everywhere. And then he got to speak to all the world leaders. So basically, he took this message to the whole world. Now, and I remember he told us when he came back, we had a conference back in 2000, and he told us, 2001 actually, he told us that one of the UN leaders at the UN, Bawa Jain, told him that the nuclear industry was an $850 billion industry. He says, you think you're going to stop that? Just the nuclear industry alone is $850 billion. You actually believe the peaceful solution is going to be able to put an end to that? There's too much money involved in this war, Did that faze him? Didn't faze him. Because he knows the only reason people are choosing war is because they're not being taught peace. Okay? They're choosing war because they're not being taught peace. The peaceful solution is going to stop all wars. It's going to stop all wars. Now, does it matter whether we believe that or not? No. But in a sense it does, because you are the ones that are taking the torch that he handed you to continue to finish the job. One individual at a time. And now we have people, Chris will tell you, he's our international director of the Peaceful Solution. He'll tell you. And Catan will tell you, he's our prison director. There's people scattered all over this earth right now that are spreading this Peaceful Solution character education program, very diligently spreading it. But that was the result of the work of a man, that started this, with this idea. Remember Chris said, his father had put that idea in his mind, 2 wrongs don't make a right, son. 2 wrongs don't make a right. And he instilled in him very early that idea that peace does not come through retaliation or striking back or any form of war. We've got to learn to respect one another. We've got to learn to choose to work it out, not fight it out. Okay, that's what we got to learn to do. We got to learn to do these things, and we can learn to do that. I want to read. Can you go to the next slide? Because I have a. Actually, let's remind ourselves what respect is real quick before I read this next part. But respect, remember, is to recognize the value of people and things and treat them with consideration, care, and concern. And I know everyone here values people. They wouldn't be here right now if they didn't. You value people. You want to see people make better choices in their life. You even value yourself because you want to see yourself make better choices. But don't forget what respect means. Now go to the next slide, because I want to show you this Peaceful Solution, this quotation here from one of our promotional books, where it says, do you want to see an end to hatred, violence, and war? There is hope. It says, watching the nightly news and reading the daily newspapers show us that we are far from having peace in today's world. Rising crime, broken homes, and school shootings are all evident that we, as educators, have a responsibility to teach our children basic moral skills. Leaders in the fields of politics, religion, science, and education are all searching for real answers to the problems currently plaguing mankind. Many of our most respected leaders see no end in sight for the violent trends society is caught in. The true moral principles, as taught by the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, are a must for changing our world into a peaceful place. At this time, many are rediscovering the benefits of following these simple moral principles of human conduct. It is the goal of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Incorporated to implement our character education program into the classrooms where children learn basic moral behavior. For our children's sake, please join us in our endeavor to promote and teach worldwide peace. Okay? Remember, it's work. We have to work toward this to achieve it. This man, I want to show you, can you go to the next picture? The next one, I believe it's after that. There it is. You see that picture right there? That is the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program team. All those people right there are getting ready to go somewhere to teach the Peaceful Solution Character Education. You see how much is put into this? Motorhome after motorhome lined up there with many, many diligent teachers. And it wasn't just them that are in that line right there. It was the people that prepared the food we had to take, and the people that are continuing to write the curriculum. There's many, many, many people involved in this job here. Okay? There's people that have given donations to keep, the gas going and, to keep those motorhomes rolling down the road. And, think about all the work that's been put into this. Okay? It takes a lot of work. Okay? But if you believe something's possible and can be achieved, you're going to work toward it. You're going to work toward it. You're going to put your blood, sweat, and tears into it. You're not just going to, talk peace, You're going to get out there and you're going to teach peace, and you're going to teach it through your example as well in your everyday life. I wanted to show a couple examples of some people that, we went to on these trips. Do we have something to show? Okay, you got it? Okay. Let's go ahead and we're going to play a couple clips for you so you can kind of see some of the work that was done by our team of peace. And this is just a small drop in the bucket. This is, just nothing compared to what's going on all over the world right now. But let's go ahead and play those clips.
Well, this is Mayor Rick Holland from the city of Benton, Arkansas. And I would like to thank the Peaceful Solution for the work that they do, not only in our community, but all throughout the United States. The Peaceful Solution came to Benton, put on a program for our city council members, and it was just amazing the difference in focus in our people and in the direction they went, and just from one program that came into our city. It's a great program. In a day where there's so many negative influences out there, it was a very positive influence that will have long-lasting effect for our city and our residents. And I just want to thank you for that.
Yeah, we got to kind of rig it up. Can you hear me now? Okay. So you see, it does take a lot of work, and it takes a lot of people. Like just now, we had a technical glitch. As you can see, we had to go to a very primitive method of showing a video there. But thanks to our, our great production crew back here, our film production crew, we were able to get the job done, right? That's the kind of thing that, is really amazing about the Peaceful Solution. We used to, when we'd go out on these trips, we'd oftentimes have many difficulties and many technical problems like we just ran into here. But I was always amazed at how calm and collected some of the other, not me, no. I'd be like tearing my hair out and like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And Chris and Catan and David were always so calm, cool, and collected, and they'd get the job done, and it would go off without a hitch. But, problems arise. But, we're the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. We got to find solutions to those problems, We know there's a problem, but we're here to fix the problems. We're here to show how can we fix the problem? And it's going to take work to do it, but we've got the tools to do it. We got the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. So LP4B, I want to finish this real quick. It says, if we believe something's possible and can be achieved, we will work toward it. Let us show our children that it is possible for our world to exist without violence and hatred. By diligently teaching them how to respectfully interact, we will give them the skills to achieve moral character. You see that? Skills to achieve moral character. Skills, something that has to be taught. Just like you learn to cook, you learn to do building or plumbing or any other skill, character education has to be taught. It's a skill. Controlling your anger, it's a skill. Solving difficulties, peacefully is a skill. You have diplomats flying all over the world, constantly trying to make peace with one another. They don't have the tools to make peace. They don't even know the first step. But you do. You're being trained in the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, and soon they too will have that knowledge. And it'll be because you stuck it out and you taught everyone that you could, one individual at a time. Remember, this is going out, this particular classes going out all over the world right now. Okay? And you don't know how many people it's reaching, but if just one person hears this message and they actually put into practice the things that they hear, think of all the trouble that could avert just in one person's life. Okay? Don't ever think that just teaching one person is not important. Whether it's a classroom or one person, they're all important, and it's going to make a difference in bringing world peace to achieve the goal that Yisrael Hawkins set out to achieve very, very many years ago. So at this time, I thank you for joining us. Now, I need you to listen closely to the schedule here, because we have a very, very important event coming up next Sunday. I believe it's 3/9. No, wait. Yeah, 3/9. On 3/9/23, we're having our one-day event, the Peaceful Solution. Excuse me? 4/9. Oh, sorry. Yeah, well, they'd have to wait another 1,000 years to have that one then, I guess. Let me redo it. Okay, let me re-say it. Next Sunday, 4/9/23, we're having our Peaceful Solution one-day event. And there will be a class after the event, okay, at 5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. On Wednesday, we will not be having class because we're going to be preparing for that one-day event. So this Wednesday, there's no class. But next Sunday, please tune in at 5:30 p.m. and we'll continue in Chapter 4 of the Respect Unit. And thanks for coming. Have a great evening.